Today, we're going to take a journey into something deeply profound and honestly almost always misunderstood. We are going to decode a really fascinating psychological mystery together. The real reason why some of the kindest, most giving people in our lives suddenly and completely just cut ties. If you've ever been totally baffled by someone's sudden silence, or, hey, maybe you're the one who has walked away, this explainer is designed to unpack the exact science and emotion behind that quiet departure.
So let me ask you a question, and I really want you to think about the deep processors in your life, or maybe even take a look in the mirror for this one. Have you ever met someone who is just incredibly warm, always ready to listen, constantly putting everyone else's needs before their own, only to suddenly disappear without a single word of warning? No dramatic arguments, no angry texts. They just quietly change their number, delete their social profiles, and slip completely into the background. Poof, gone.
To the people left behind, this kind of exit can feel incredibly confusing, right? And this brilliantly illustrates the gap between what people think is happening and what's actually happening. Externally, the perception is often really harsh. People might say, oh, they were secretly fake, or that they're being manipulative. But the psychological reality, it's entirely different. It is actually a biological survival mechanism. It's the result of a brain that has just completely, utterly run out of fuel. It's not cruelty, it's pure exhaustion. To really understand why this happens, we have to name the heavy, unseen emotional weight these individuals carry around every single day. We call it the burden of guarded empathy. Okay, let's dive into this. Guarded empathy isn't just about being a good listener. Deep processors actually have highly active mirror neurons in their brains. They don't just logically notice that you're upset, their nervous systems literally, physically, mirror and feel your anxiety, your stress, and your pain. They absorb the emotional environment around them like a giant sponge, which, as you can imagine, takes an immense physical and cognitive toll on them.
But where does this intense, almost overwhelming level of empathy even come from? Well, often we can trace it right back to childhood, specifically to a concept called childhood parentification. This happens when a child is put in a position to manage the emotional climate of the adults around them way before they are emotionally ready to do so. They learn really early on that they have to suppress their own needs just to keep the peace. They became strong because, quite simply, they had absolutely no other option.
Which brings us to a fascinating, though honestly kind of heartbreaking, dynamic in attachment psychology. In childhood, their go-to strategy was suppressing their needs just to survive their environment. But as an adult, that morphs into this chronic habit of overgiving. Because they grew up feeling completely replaceable or overlooked, they unconsciously try to secure love and safety now by giving far more energy, time, and care than they ever receive back.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because when you are carrying the emotional weight of literally everyone around you and you're constantly giving more than you have, a breakdown isn't just a possibility. It is a biological certainty. Welcome to the inevitable phase of the people pleaser's journey, the silent collapse. It happens in a very predictable internal sequence. It's like a domino effect. It starts with a deep-seated fear of rejection, rooted back in that childhood we talked about. Because of that fear, they avoid conflict at all costs. To keep the peace, they just keep suppressing their own needs. Eventually, trying to be everything for absolutely everyone leads to total cognitive depletion. They're secretly destroying their own mental bandwidth just to keep other people comfortable.
But here's the catch. Push-down frustration and exhaustion do not just magically disappear. Those unprocessed emotions have to go somewhere. And you know what? They usually hide right in the body. They manifest as unexplained physical pain, sudden irritable reactions that seem totally out of character, and severely disrupted sleep cycles. The body is literally keeping the score of every single boundary that wasn't set.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the dangerous disconnect it reveals. Outwardly, their appearance is sky high. They look completely fine. They're smiling. They are still showing up for you every day. But internally, their cognitive bandwidth is hovering near zero. They are secretly drowning, and because they don't know how to safely ask for help without feeling like a burden, absolutely no one around them even notices the water rising. So when the brain finally hits that absolute breaking point, it has a desperate, purely biological response. It bypasses logic, it throws politeness out the window, and goes straight into survival mode. What it seeks, above all else, is cognitive quiet. Because their nervous systems are just so incredibly sensitive to their environment, their brain state is heavily dictated by who is around them. In growth mode, when they're surrounded by peace and mutual support, they absolutely thrive.
But when they are in survival mode, surrounded by draining energy, chronic complainers, or endless drama, their highly sensitive nervous system locks right into a state of high alert.
To put that into perspective, consider this striking reality. For highly empathetic people, dealing with draining social contact burns mental energy twice as fast as it does for the average person. 2 times. Think of it like a smartphone running on maximum brightness with 20 heavy apps open. The battery is just going to plummet.
And when that battery inevitably hits zero, an emergency shutdown is triggered. They literally do not have the mental strength left to negotiate boundaries or even try to explain why they are so exhausted, so they just disconnect. This sudden silence is actually an emergency physiological reset. Solitude becomes the only way they can forcefully lower their cortisol levels and protect whatever tiny shred of peace they have left.
But what shifts this from just a temporary retreat into a permanent, silent exit? Well, that brings us to our final boundary. We call this the protected trust threshold. This is the ultimate point of no return. This threshold isn't built overnight. It's built over a lifetime. It usually begins with that emotional neglect in childhood, which then compounds over years and years of repeated broken trust in adulthood. By the time they reach a breaking point, their brain's survival networks have become fiercely protective. The brain simply says, nope, no more. We absolutely cannot afford another emotional hit.
What makes this silent exit actually possible is the unique psychological makeup of the deep processor. Because they grew up having to rely only on themselves, they've developed incredibly high survival independence. They know exactly how to handle pain and solve problems entirely on their own. As a result, they have very low social dependency. It's not that they hate connection, but they absolutely do not need performative, draining relationships. They are completely fine walking away if the connection isn't genuine.
It is absolutely vital that we completely reframe how we view this final cutoff. It is rarely an act of anger or spite. Actually, it's a profound act of self-awareness. It is the exact moment they stop trying to manage everyone else's emotions and finally step up to take full responsibility for their own healing.
So the crucial point is this. You cannot keep setting yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. The silent exit is simply a highly empathetic person finally giving themselves the permission to rest and deciding to no longer be the fuel for someone else's comfort. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on today. If you had to choose between staying in a performative connection that is constantly draining your energy or embracing the absolute quiet of your own boundaries, wouldn't you choose peace? It validates the right we all have to step back, to protect our cognitive bandwidth, and to choose a quiet exit when the cost of staying is just too high.